We'll begin a sikha from Chelik Aleph. Look at the sikhas on Parsha Shmini. I've been looking for Chelik Aleph. Look at the sikhas. There isn't that many of the relatively basic sikhas on Shmini. Even this gets into nigla in a very strong way, and also it talks and brings the hayras of the Chassidus. But some of the niglas are very interesting. Birur versus the chalois of it. We'll see it inside. The Parsha Shavua medubar al behemus hatoiris amtaris la'achila v'behemus hatmeis hasuris ba'achila. Towards the end of the Parsha, it talks about all the kosher and non-kosher animals. Torah mitzayan is shnei simonim lebehemut Torah. One thing is malagera, it has to chew its cud. Umafreses Parsha, it has its hoof split. B'dvar hasimonim kayam chakira. The Ragachava brings it down. Im he meshamshim goimim letara letuma, upirish hadavar shebeglal ha'uvda shabehema mailas geira mafreses parsa hitoira v'chein lahepech, oishe einam ella simonim mevarerim, upirish hadavar shetaras habehema nevas goimim acherim, Ela Kadesha Neda Anu Ilu Behemis Toirus Cover Ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu Simonim Shabam Tzusam Neda Kein Toirus. In other words, like this. There's actually a similar Kler and Nigla concerning Eidei Kiyum and Eidei Birur, is our witnesses just to be mevared, or are witnesses that actually establish it. And there's actually differences, it depends. Eidei Kiddushim, Eidei Gittin is considered usually Eidei Kiyum, whereas in other cases, Dinah Mominus, it's not that the witnesses made, let's say, the halva. If two witnesses come to Bezdin and they testified that Reuven borrowed money from Shimon. So it's not that their witnessing it or their testifying makes the halva. No, the halva took place whether or not they would have been there. But they are Eidei Birur. So the question is the same thing over here by the simonim of a kosher animal. Is the simon of the kosher animal what makes the kosher animal tahir or tamei? In other words, because it's mafriasas parsa, because it's treshal shesa, because it's malagera, are those the things that make it tahir? Or is it pshat that Hashem decided that a cow is going to be tahir, and similar animals to the cow, let's say, is going to be tahir? How are we going to know what animals are tahir? So he says, check out their hooves, check out if they're malageda. But the malageda and mafreses parsa is only a siman, as we call it simonitar, it's only a siman, it doesn't make them tahir. This is the two ways of looking at the simonim in our parsha. Everything has to have a nafkamina la'alacha. Like a lot of times the Gemara will ask when there is a machlokes between two opinions, will ask, my benayu, what's the difference if we hold this way or that way? So what's the difference if we say that the simonim are the kiyum hadavar or the birur hadavar? Hevdel mishnei fanim hu halacha hi shayotzim min hatohir tohir. That's a halacha. If something was born from a kosher animal, it's kosher. Af b'mikra, or it comes out in a different way. Milk from a kosher animal is kosher. Milk from a treifa animal is treif. Af b'mikra she'ein loy simone tara. Let's say if there was a case that there was no simone tara by this animal that was born, it was some type of freak. A lot of times you have different things that are born that are not the way the parents look. So it can sometimes happen that an animal can be that way also. Ledugma, for example, hayotzim min atoir ufrasois of klutos. Let's say a cow had a calf, but the calf's hooves were not split; they were joined. So therefore, lamrois sheina simonitada rehu toir. Why me'achar sheyotza noiled min atoir? Since we know it was born from a toir, it's toir also. So now the Rebbe says we have to understand how this connects to the two ways of looking at the simonitar. Im naniach simonitar einam ela simonim mevarerim muvenes halacha zu gam bebchinas asvara kiven shu yoytzim min hatohir ein drushim simonim. if the whole reason why the simonim are there is to let us know that it's kosher, not that the simonim make it kosher, so we have now a different way to know that it's kosher. It was born from a kosher animal, so we know it's kosher. So we don't care if it had simonim or didn't have simonim, because simonim are only to be mevarer adover. Avol im naniach shasimonim mahavim sibol atara. So then it's really a difficult thing to understand. If the simonim are making it tahor, mechayev ahegyon shemi sheparsois of klutis yetame. So then, why taki is the halacha that ayotzim and atahor tahor, even though they may not have the simonim? B'chol halacha shuhu tahor ein el mishum gzeiras hakasul. Okay, but it's not enough kamina la halacha. What's going to be the nafkamina la halacha? Hevdel nafkamina legaba halacha bein hadeish atayrim mitzad hasvara lebein hadeish mishum gzeiras hakasul v'um asur lesachik bedvar meichel tahor. There's a din. You're not allowed to take, let's say, Sfardim that know what type of chagovim are kosher chagovim, kosher arbe, kosher locust. You're not allowed, it's a din, it's halachi, you're not allowed to use it like a toy to play with a kosher animal. You can't use it as a toy. Mamed varim amorim kishu memin toher. Aval kasher memin tamei v'taharosei eina elam gzeres hakasav ein kayim iser zeh. The Rebbe is going to bring a proof that it's not kayim this iser if it's because of gzeres hakasav. Haychach lakach ala posik livyasin zeh yitzarta losachik boy. Says that Hashem created the livyasin to play with it. We know that Mashu hu oisa Aimerli Yisrael lasis. Hashem follows the same Torah that He told the Yidden. A Leviathan is not a kosher animal. I'm sorry. It is going to be eaten la'asad lavei. Shoyel Yerushalmi ve'ech muter l'sachek bedavar tahor u'metaret. So the Yerushalmi answers ki al Leviathan u'be'etzem davar tamei. V'huter mechlal iser, like a gzeres hakasav that made the Leviathan tahor. So what do you see? That when there's a gzeres hakasav on something that's tummy that it should be tahor, then you're allowed to play with it. It's not considered to be mesachik with a davar tahor because really it's a davar tummy, but just that there was a gzeres hakasav that it should be mutter.
Speaking about when you speak about playing with speaking about when it's a piece of food, when it's an animal that was shechted, etc. So if it's Torah. In other words, there's no problem in playing with a dog, playing with a...
No, it's talking about what's alive.
What?
It's talking about what's alive. As food, it's a different thing. That's b'zoyin oichlin or batashkes or something like that. Here we're talking about a living kosher animal.
Let's say you have a pet
chicken.
A pet goat, a chicken.
So it depends, you got to know what the Chazal mean by playing with it. But, to like throw it around, you want to throw it to someone else, even if there's no tsar balachayim. In a case where, I throw the chicken to him and he throws the chicken back without tsar balachayim.
Zilzal, being disrespect, playing in a disrespectful type of way.
Yeah, we're not talking about l'sachik boy does not mean entertaining the dog or whatever. That's not what l'sachik means.
Right. It's not interacting with it.
But
right.
It says אסור לשחק בדבר מאכל טהור. It doesn't say בדבר חי טהור. Maybe I'm missing.
Where does it say Michael? It says
The third paragraph.
the third paragraph. I don't know, because earlier he said just, or later he said that it's b'davar tahor. My memory is that maybe I'm mistaken, maybe your father-in-law is right, but my memory is that it's talking about a living animal. Mm-hmm. And Leviathan zeh yitzarta l'sachik boy, what's it talking about? The pashtas. Hashem plays with the Leviathan while it's alive. It's not talking about the Leviathan after it's already sliced up and lying over there in Olam Haba by the Shulchan by the Tzaddikim. So if it's talking about a dead animal, what's the whole question about the Yerushalmi? The Leviathan was talking about a living Leviathan that Hashem is kaviyachol playing with it, whatever that means.
But on the other hand, you can ask, Why call him b'dvar ma'achal?
First of all,
Like,
from here you can't be medayik anything.
Yeah.
Their translation is very not meduyik. I'd have to look
Maybe
in the
it is
original
whatever.
This is a
Likutei
translation.
Sichos. This is a translation,
Oh,
and it's
okay.
also a bad translation.
What was
I
it
know from
originally
experience. It was Yiddish,
written?
in Yiddish.
Give it
So,
original, but whatever, it's not for now.
okay. So what do we see from here? Nira efer mekan kishatade hi megzeres hakosov mutter lesachik boy. So if we say that simonim of tar are mevarer, they only are megala that something is tahor. So the same thing, when kol hayotzim min hatohir, even though it doesn't have any simonim, you don't need birur. You have already the birur because it went out from the tahir. So it's tahir not because of exeris hakosov, because it's tahir because of the din that it's tahir. So you cannot play with an animal that has no simoni tahara, and the only reason it's kosher is because it came out from a kosher animal. But if you tell me that the simoni kashrus are not they're not just mevarim, but the simoni kashrus of mafreses parts of malagera is actually making it tahor. And here we're saying that it's tahor, even though it doesn't have those simonim. Why? Because it's exeris hakosov that kol hayotzim min tahor. So therefore, if it's the only reason why it's tahor is because of exeris hakosov, really it should be tamei. We know from the Yerushalmi that if something should be tamei and it's only tahor because of exeris hakosov, you're allowed to play with it, just like it says that Hashem plays with the levyasim. So that would be the nafkamina lahalacha, where if we would say that the simonim are what make the animal kosher, or the simonim are only mevarer that the animal are kosher.
The Xeris Akasiv is that it's tar, the Leviathan is tar, or that you could eat it anyway, it's not tar? Maybe it's the opposite.
What's the lashon? The lashon in the Yerushalmi is K'aleviyasin betzim davar tamei, and the quote should be from the lashon of the Yerushalmi. V'hutar miklal iser. So v'hutar miklal iser, you could learn pshat, like you're saying. You could eat it even though it's a davar tamei, or v'hutar miklal iser means it was now established to be tahir. But I think this, regardless, it would still, if you're saying that it's a gzeres hakosov, that kol hayotzim min tahir, you're not saying that it is tahir. All you're saying is you're allowed to eat it. So it could still fall into that general category of the phrase v'hutar michlal yisr. Ois beis. Mitzuyis ha'chachas mispar shesimone hatara mahavim siblatara. Here the Rebbe is going to bring proof to say that actually the simonim actually make it tahor. It's not just a birur. Kein mashma gam aloshna posik ki malagera hu parsa eina mafreses. And if you translate the word ki as because, so that means that's the sibah. Why is it tahor? Why is it kosher? Ki malagera. Ha'chacham ne'sefes min ha'alacha tarnagol de agama tarnagol ha'agam asur. So here's a very interesting din in the Gemara. And there's different ways of learning the Gemara. There's Rashi, there's the way Taisus explains Rashi, and then there's the way Taisus himself learns. Here we're going to learn the Rashi and the way Taisus explains Rashi. The Gemara says that a tarnagol, the agma, the way they translate it, a swamp chicken. It's a certain type of species of chicken. That is not a kosher animal. But that's only the tarnagol, the male. But tarnagolas, the agma, is kosher. We're going to go now according to the Shita that says that they're the same species, except the Gemara says that the tarnagoil, the male will be treif, and the female will be kosher. But if so, how can there ever be a tarnagoil, the agama? How can it be treif? It comes from a tahir. Who lays the eggs from which the male tarnagoil, the agama, comes from? The female. And the female is kosher. If the female is kosher, so therefore the children should be kosher because kol hayotzim min tahir, tahir. So if so, the Tosfos asked that question, how can you say that any tarnagoil, the agma, will be treif and the female will be kosher? It can't be. So the Tosfos answers, but Tosfos namar, ki b'mikra zeh, in such a case of a chick that comes from an egg, ein keveya haklal hayotzim min hatoher toher. Shekein ha'efroyach me'afra kagodl godl min ha'ofer. Leficha chutame beglal simane atum. In other words, like this, the Rebbe is being very much mekatzer. The point of the inyan is that the meaning is that the afroyach, the chick, comes from the egg. And the egg is not considered something that is direct from the mother. It's not like as soon as the mother lays the egg, boom, you have a chick that comes out. No.
It grows
The mother, exactly. The mother lays the egg, the egg is on the ground, and after a while, it's goydel. The expression of Tosfos is godel min afra. So it's not considered like a different case of yotzim min hatoyer. It's not like the case where you had a cow that gave birth to a calf, and the calf's feet were klutois, were closed. That came directly from the mother. Here, the tarnagoil, the agma, that doesn't have whatever simone kashrus you need to have for a chicken, it doesn't have it. Mashenki, the tarnagoilus does have it, and we don't care that it came from a kosher hen because it didn't come from the hen. It came from the egg, which came from the ground, and so on.
If you would have a chicken that lays an egg and
then immediately
and then it doesn't hatch with the simanim, let's say.
So
Then
according to this Tosfos, so then taka wouldn't apply. Tosfos has also a different shita which argues on Rashi, and maybe it would depend which svara and Tosfos we go according. So he says like this. Now, if you look at this halacha, let's analyze it in light of the two ways of looking at simonim. Are simonim the things that make the animal kosher, or are simonim the things that are mevarer? Im noimar simonim mevarerim belvad. If that's all the simonim are doing, harim acher sheyadu lanu hasug shemenu yoytze atarnagol, ma ichpas lanu adavar sheyesh lanu simoni tuma, sheyesh lanu simoni tuma. What do we care if the simonim are only a birur? It doesn't make a difference. We know where this chicken came from. Hechrach efer loimer shasimonim mahavim siba latara va'klala yoytzim min hatoyer toyer ugzeres hakosov. Like we just now said before, that if the simonim are the ones that are making it kosher, so why is a yoytzim min hatoyer toyer? It doesn't have kosher the simonim. So it's ugzeres hakosov. That's what the Eibishter wanted. Because the klal of kol hayotzim min hatoyer only applies where the Torah applies it, not when it comes through the ground and so on. So here the Rebbe brings another proof that we see that simonim are not just mevarerim, but the simonim of malagerim, afreses parsa, actually make it kosher or not. So now, the Rebbe is going to take this now on a deeper level. Once he explained it Al pi nigla, now he's going to explain this idea, the kishure inyonim al pi pnimis. Yesh eifil lahavnus hakesher ben milas geirem afreses parsel ben tahara. Biyichud la'acher shebepnimis ha'inyan. Af im naniach she'ein ha'simonim al mevarerim. Even if you say that it's only a birur, kivin sheyadua sha'akoil af inyane oilam b'ashgacha pratis v'chol shkin inyane ha'toyra mitziseh. Hare uvda zu atzma shesimonim elu nikvu l'simone tara mishameshes ha'chacha shem kshurim matara. Lefachas b'tor tetzah im loy b'tor goyrim kedei rishayna. So either way, whether you go according to the opinion that the simone tara are the ones that make the animal kosher, even if you go according to the opinion or the gang that simone tara are only mevader, but the very fact that by hashgacha pratis simone tara are connected with the kosher animals, so there must be an inner meaning, an inner concept that the simone tara show on spiritually, beruchnius, that has to do with tara and kashrus. Gimel.
So what we just learned though before, we went into the whole Indian is whether it's a
birur or it's actually making it,
or it's a siba.
Right.
So that was just really just Yagdal Torah.
Yeah, even though what we're going to say is a lot geschmacker according to the conclusion that we came. We came with the conclusion, we brought different proofs that it's a sibba. If it's a sibba, it's even more so interesting and necessary to understand what is the spiritual meaning of the simonim, and by understanding the spiritual meaning of simonim, we'll understand how it relates to kashrus. So first we have to understand the whole idea of kashrus. He brings it, the Ramban says this in Chumash, Kivin shekol davar meichel, she'odam oichel nasa dama basar kibsare, asra ha'toyras ha'macholim asurim, kedei shelo yutbu ba'odam tchunas ha'davar ha'asur, she'enan toivos. So if animals have bad midas, we will incorporate those bad midas within us.
That's why we're not supposed to eat
Non-kosher animals. Can't move and gam inyazashal simoni, and as they say, you are what you eat. You want to be a horse? Eat horse meat. You want to be a pig? Mekan move and gam inyazashal simoni taravatuma, meaning in a more refined way, in a more edler way. Ha'isr lechol behemes she'enon malas gedo mafrisis parsa kedei shetchuneseyam loy tavorna la'adam mechiach ki isnagusay shal adam tzricha liyos mafris parso malagedo. Derech Agav, there is a very geschmack place somewhere else in the Rishimus of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe explains the idea of kol sheyesh lo snapir v'kaskeses, fins and scales. What's the meaning of that in the kashrus of kosher fish? What's the significance of it? But that's not for here. Here we're talking about the mafris parsa malagedo. Behesem la'amr shekol ina b'toyra mahava hayras derech la'adam gam prat ze asher simone habehema mishamshim lefachas birur taras habehema hu hayra kitchunas halas geira va'afrosas parsa ba'adam mevarerois uboichnois as hanagoisav im tohoyrosei merchas v'shalom lahepach. In other words, going back to even the view that says that it's only simone birur, it's not the sibba. So the same thing by a person. How do I know if I am acting in a kosher manner or if I'm not acting in a kosher manner? So I have simonim. There are certain simonim that will tell me, am I acting in a kosher manner or not? Prat nois, and I'll explain what that means. Prat noisav ba'amr, havchana va'biru b'yachs l'tadehim rak b'kesher l'behema. Af ba'adam, b'kesher l'behema shebelibi shal adam ha'nefesh ha'bahamis is yetzahara. Havchana va'birur einam b'kesher li'nyone and nefesh halakis toira mitzvisa imem koli lishma oyem mishum negia atzmis. That's not what we're trying to figure out. Here, this Malageda, Mafreses Parsa, whatever that is, Beruchnis, is only about finding about my inner behemoth. It's not about the Odom that's inside of me. It's not about the Nefesh Elokis that's inside of me. That I'm not so concerned about. Because the Nefesh Elokis is concerned about Torah mitzvahs. It doesn't make a difference why or what's the motivation. It's Torah mitzvahs. Shekein af kisha davar menegia atzmis. Yesh lilmoid Torah l'kayim mitzvahs la'olam yilmoid v'yekayim mitzvahs afil shaloi l'shma shemetayich shaloi l'shma bal l'shma.
Atzmis is like ulterior motives.
Right, exactly. Havchani hirak bekesher li'inyanim hagashmim. When do you need to have a simon to be mavarer? Is it kosher or not? When you're not dealing with Torah mitzvahs. Here's where you need to be careful and you need to be able to distinguish and figure it out. Hakshurim benefsha bahamis im tahoira behema im lav. So he says as follows: Shnei suga behemas, gam suga behema atmei an emarim betoira. Upirish hadavar shafilu bisnagus al pitoira yitochen li is behema tmeya. That was an interesting thing. Behemas tmeyas are spoken about in the Torah. Not only that, even more so, we find that there's often going to be enumerated the behemoths tmeyas and not the behemoths Torah. It's not going to tell you you can eat cows and you can eat deer and you can eat this. It's going to tell you the nevis, the shofar, these, that, the other things are not, the chazir, the gomel, these are things that are not kosher. Whatever, different Mefarshim give different reasons why. But Lapoil, the behemoth tmeya is in the Torah. So what's the deeper meaning that the behemoth tmeya is in the Torah? Kedivre Rambam she'itochen navel b'rishus haTorah, or novel b'rishus haTorah. Koloimar 2:12. Nidma hadavar shadav b'rishus haTorah. There are things that we could think is b'rishus haTorah. In English, it's called being a glutton, or in Lashon Kodesh, zoil v'soive. He has totally kosher food. But if he eats it in an inappropriate manner, even if it has the best hashgacha, and he's drinking the wine under the best hashgacha, but it can be a zoil v'soiv. So the Ramban says this is novel b'rishus haTorah, novel b'rishus haTorah. He's being disgusting with the permission of the Torah. He has a big hashgacha on it. But the Rebbe says it doesn't mean that it's really b'rishus haTorah because there's a mitzvah of kedoshim tiyu. Shekein la'mitu shel davar over Adam Kazal Tzivui Kedoshim Tiyu Tzivui Ikri V'Shroshim, which the Ramban himself says in Parshas Kedoshim. And there's, according to some Mefarshim, it's a mitzvah esa dairaisa to be mekadesh atzmecha b'muterlach. In other words, it can have the biggest hashgacha on it, and it can, but if a person's eating it just to be a zoil v'soivei, so then he's over on a mitzvah esa dairaisa of Kedoshim Tiyu. So how do I go ahead and how do I tell? Is this a novel b'rishus haTorah? Is it not? K'dei lahavchin eizu behemoth tahora mitzayeres haTorah shlei simonim aleph mafreses parsa and beis malas geda, as you can explain what those is. Ba'ofen klali kaim gam bebehema hevdel yisoidi bein harosh u'bein haregel. K'fi shemuvan gam hilchos treifes v'chulu. In the halachas of treifes, if there is a damage in the head, or even a tiny little hole in the brain or whatever, makes the whole animal treif. If it's in the foot, it doesn't make the whole animal treif. It could even be cut a certain part of the foot up to a certain height, and it's still not treif. It's still kosher, the animal. So therefore, we see that even an animal has a difference between the head and the feet. Even by an animal, a man for sure, a man stands upright, so his head is a few feet off the ground. Even a behema, the head is farther from the ground, but the feet is on the ground. What does this indicate? That even by an animal, the head is further from the ground and the feet touches the ground. So it means to say, even the person's inner behema, the inner behema of a person has seichel. It has to be invested in higher things. So you tell a story, Mesuper, Ki HaRebe Rasham Nishim Seiden Omer L'Chosid, Ish Tzura, Bal Kishroines, She's Maser L'Mischer Ba'ardolayim. Ardolayim in Yiddish, they would call it Kaloshin, galoshes. So he says that the Rebbe Rashab told him, Raglayim Tkuis Ba'ardolayim Kvari Isi, Achroish Ba'ardolayim, as the couple Zayin Kaloshin, that I didn't see. So in other words, he was saying, you take your whole head and this is what you're putting it into, even though your head is holding by higher things. Milvadois, even the foot that should be touching the ground, even the foot shouldn't be mamish on the ground. Tzricha liyas gam baregel atzma bein haregel bein adama parsa. Process. The idea of that has this the parsa. In English they call it a hoof. Hefsik bein raglaim lebein artias. So there isn't mamish the foot of the animal touches the ground. There's something that separates still between the foot of the animal touching the ground. Even in other places, the Rebbe talks about it, this is the idea of the importance of wearing shoes, but in the Makim Kaddish, you don't wear shoes. Like Moshe Rabbeinu was told, Shalom Alechem Al Raglecha, when he was by the Sneh. Or the Kainim, the Beis Hamikdash, did not wear shoes, because the whole purpose of shoes is to separate between the person and artias. But when you're dealing in holy ground, in a holy place, over there you don't need that separation. So he says, Baram, Parsa Zu, B'muven Shal Mechitza, Hefsik Vehelam, Tzricha Liyash Sua. Why does it have to be split? Why does it have to have the split hooves? Kaloimar, Gam Binyonim Ha'artzim Tzricha Lahoyer Alakus V'gam Bahem Yesh Liris Alakus. That's the split. The split is to allow the higher koiches, the ruchnias, to come down into physical things. Let's skip the brackets to this next paragraph. Ka'amar Betanya, Shegam binyoni eretz lo yifredu me'echad ha'emes. It says, Goy echad ba'aretz. We say this Monday, Thursdays, davening, and so on. What's the pshat? Goy echad ba'aretz. Yidden are a nation, are a goy that brings echad, achtus haboire, even into the aretz, even into the ground. So that they're not separated. Me'echad ha'emes HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ulefichach tzarich liyis hasedek shalom, and has to be completely split. L'chol oimek haparsa. The Gemara talks about it. Halacha talks about it. How about if the hoof doesn't go all the way through and through? The split in the hoof is not all the way through and through. It's a problem. Sheyagia gam lamata, because you want that the kedusha should permeate and reach all the way to the ground. Rak oz nasa behema tahira. Kloimer. Habehema hagashmius ha'echrechius leguf hi behema tahira. Ukfisha kosev b'kehilas yankiv l'machaber sefer meloya roim ki behema rosh tevis. It's a very interesting rosh tevis. You think about behema as being something coarse. Amor, it's also lechel basar. It says, he says, Behemas Rosh Tevis basar hayored min hashamayim. That's Rosh Tevis behema. Umuvan, she tahira ki ein davar tamei yored min hashamayim. That is one point that we see about Mafreses Parsa. Prat nois of yesh ba'afreses Parsa, a Parsa chaluka l'shtayim. Umashmos hadavar sha'alich al gabe ha'aretz hamaga imanyonim artzim, page 213. Tzricha liyis b'shnei kivunim. The fact that it's split into two shows that there has to be two directions. Yemin mekareves usmoil doicha. Mitzuyim ke'ela shel didam yemin mekareves loikol matzer. Their shita is, you need to be open to everything. Heim toyanim kedei l'takarev Yehuda l'toyra kedei l'hakil b'inyonim shel toyra v'af l'shanis chas v'sholom s'atoyra l'fi ruach hazman. You know what? You want more Yidden to come to shul? Let's have a microphone. Let's take down the mechitza. Let's do other things because we're trying to bring more Yidden in. Etzem ha'inu sheyesh l'karev es kol ha'Yudin l'toyra hu nachin. Kfi sheduber kvar pamim misbar biyachas l'pirish l'mishnah oyeves abrius mekarmel l'toyra sha'afilu es elu she'enam ela briyos ba'alma she'ein lem kol chashivas milvada uvda she'em bruev shal kadosh baruch hu. That's their only value. They are not contributing anything else in this world. Yes, l'karev l'toira. Even people like them, you have to be mekarev to Torah. Avla taina shol shem kach yesh lasis tikunim. Shem lamita shol davar kilkulim b'toira chas v'sholem. He pulcha shol derech ha-toira ukilosh nagmish negufa umekarvan la-toira. You need to bring those people close to Torah. Yesh lekarev oisam es abrius la-toira avaloi liger chas v'sholem es ha-toira eleihem v'lashanoisa lefi rucham. And that's why the Rebbe says you need to have both the right part of the hoof and the left part of the hoof. You have to know to be mekad of them, but push away those things that are negative. And the Rebbe also bavorns af iloisa tzedek satayna shaydei kach efshel lekarev Yehudi. Even if it's right that by taking down the mechitza or by having a microphone in Shul on Shabbos, whatever, you're going to be able to be mekad of another Yid. Yesh ledas ki al pi din ha-Torah asur l'shanas chas v'sholem afilu digdu kal shel Torah hei medaraisa v'hei medarabonon v'afilu takona she'iskinu rabbeinu b'doros ha'achronim. The only exception is we find by a Navi could temporarily suspend a din the eraisa. And we bring the proof from Eliyahu Behar Carmel that Eliyahu was already after they built the Beis HaMikdash. Once they built the Beis HaMikdash, you weren't allowed to be makriv karbanas outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Still in all, he made a mizbeach on Har Carmel, not inside the Beis HaMikdash. So he says, Ela b'mikra shel navi emes hamoyra zeis cheiras shabel vad. First of all, we have to know that he's a navi and he's a truthful navi because he already proved himself on previous occasions. And only as a Hiraz Shah. Sha'az yeshna halacha b'Torah. That itself is part of Torah. She kechol mitzvahs. It's no different than the other mitzvah. She yesh l'shmoy loy kel Yobar Carmel, who was a Navi v'Hiraz Shah. Ach lula zois, if you don't have a Navi telling you to do it, and it's not a Hiraz Shah, also listes chas v'sholem afilu ziz kolshum min ha-Torah limrois ha-te'elas ha'asuy limvoya mekach. That would be true even if bending the rules or breaking the rules would bring another Yid closer to Yiddishkeit. But the Rebbe says it's not even a true statement. It's not going to happen that through bending the rules, we're going to bring people closer to Yiddishkeit. Kol shkein kishal amita shal davar lo yizabal vad shay dekach lo yisukan davar ala af adrabi yagaru yosef. Hamekarvim atzmam yigrudu acharei habrius ad kedei loser chas v'sholem legamri min ha-Torah v'ayadus, as we could see in a lot of these other movements. There's a similar story with the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe said once someone asked the Frierdiker Rebbe about doing something like this, changing something around or lessening something to be able to be able, for whatever reason, to be able to be mekarav Yidin. And the person explained that when there is a fire burning, you don't look if it's clean water or dirty water. You use any water to put out the fire. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said that's only if it's water. But if it's oil, if it's gasoline, if benzene, so then it's not only not going to put out the fire, it's going to make it worse. And here he brings a different mashal, the Frierdiker Rebbe. You ask the person, how did it happen? How did he all of a sudden find himself in the forest? And the forest, there's bears and there's lions. How did he all of a sudden get here? All of a sudden, he walked out of his house and got into the forest? No. Ain't pirush adavar sheyotza beis miyad el oimek hayar ki im tchila halach b'derech hamelech malchet shaloylem v'lachar mikein sotem b'derech hamelech ki chut asayre he went off. Lachar mikein oit ki chut asayre v'oit ki chut asayre at shemotzes atzmim b'oimek hayar min achayis hatorvis. The same thing if we think that we could bend the rules a little bit here for good reasons. But we'll take this thing away and that thing away. So little by little, we find ourselves all of a sudden in a terrible situation. The best example of it is all these like American movements where we see they just want to make this change. Don't do the davening in Hebrew, do it in English, do it in German, do it like this, do it like that. What's the big deal? English davening, German davening, Hebrew davening, Marash. But like this, little by little by little, and now we know that they, by them, the worst things is okay. Hasimen shel mafreses parsa eine masbik v'dorish simen noisef shel malageir lefnei kol pe'ula gashmis she'adam oimed lasis drusha le'isa v'diun heitev. In Yiddish he says it medarfes gut iberkayen. You need to really chew this over. Levarer pam u pamayim im lasas adover v'ketzad lasoy soy rak oz tahoira behem. Page 214. Al pi Torah Chassidus biyachas leinin klala berurim birur ban v'achakach birur ma. It's called, there's different levels of berurim. Just to give a simple example of this. We know berurim is likened to, let's say you have precious metal or gold or silver. I saw on different videos where they find, like, say, crystal in the ground or whatever. So first, you need to take off the thick clods of earth. And then you need to go, a birur sheni, it's called in Chassidus. You take, let's say, that piece of gold, you took off the big pieces of shmutz, now you need to take that piece of gold, melt it, and get out the finer pieces, the edler pieces. The same thing in birurim, when I deal with things that have to do with the gashmis of this world, I need to do also these two processes. First, we do the smaller things, we do the general things, and then we have to again iberkayin and chew this over again. Now he's talking about birds. He doesn't go into the details that I said in a different place he talks about it, but here it goes in general. You can't just judge by simonim. You also need to know by a tradition. This is a bird that was known to be a kosher bird. And that's why some people don't eat turkey, actually. There's the family, people from the family of Shalom, I think. They don't eat turkey because they consider turkey a completely different type of bird than chicken, and just because chicken has a Masorah, that Masorah doesn't apply by turkey.
The Shalom once saw a turkey doris.
He actually saw a turkey doris.
And Sidus goes in, his sets up.
His sets on don't eat it, right?
We have some sets in Kfar
yeah. And they don't eat it. So the Rebbe says, "L'chura l'shem mat soirach v'mesoira v'arei efshel levarer al pi asimonim levadam. Ach pirush hadavar ke'ein la'adam lismach al sichlei ha'atzmi." If you're going by simonim, you're saying, I'm relying on my mind. It's not enough my own mind. I need to look and see what was the Masorah beforehand. You're talking lo Shulchan Aruch v'afil lefi sichlei lisnaig lefnim meshuras adin. You could be learning Shulchan Aruch, and you could be a mahader, and you can be lefnim meshuras adin. The liyas ba b'shah b'shol tachtis rachman l'tzlan. Why? Because you think I can go it my own way. Tzricha liyas mesoira shemashmusa gam hismasrus v'yiskashus l'Rebe. That's part of the Masorah. The Rebbe tzayid. What's the mean tzayid? It's a lashon in Chazal. Rebbe she'asak ba'atzolas nefashis Yisrael ubaki bahem ub'shmoiseyem shal atzas ha'yetzer. He is able to save the Yidden from atzas ha'yetzer. Now I want to go back to a little piece that I skipped on page 212, the brackets on the top. And we were talking about that even in the artsius, you need to see the lakus. That's why it has to be mafreses parsa, it has to be parcel prusois, that the lakus can go down all the way to the ground. So he brings more of a Kabbalic musik, kederach shemuz v'b'Torah Chassidus l'gaba asayris, concerning the idea of hair. שבאישה הרי שר באישה ערווה, וכן בלוויים נאמר ואווירו שר וגוירה. ואילו בנוזר נאמר גודל פרס הראשי. And it's considered holy, it's considered Kaddish. וההסבר הוא כי במוקים בהחייס ואור במידה מועטה, where there's a very little amount of chayis originally. Isha is the level of malchus, Levim is the level of gvura, so it's already a chayis mitzumtzemes. Mahava asayra shem b'chinas tzimtzum u'boim rak behefsek shal gulgoylus, that shows that the chayis is very little, so when you have the chayis like doubly little, you have malchus or you have gvura, and on top of that you have cyrus, then you're going to have a problem. So now it's a chesron. Ach b'mokim sha'achayis va'or beribui. Like by a nazir, tzriches li'yasayris. L'fichach b'nazir kodesh yiyah gedal pera v'chulu. Kach b'inyan ha'parsa shal b'heima yitzricha li'yasua, to make sure that the chayis alaki reaches all the way down.